Right, there we go. And welcome to another episode of the Turn Up for What podcast, talking your Houston Texans. Straight from the Great British Isles, we are back after an unfortunate playoff defeat. And here we are in a game that probably could have been a lot different looking back on it the last few days. But I'm joined firstly by Graham, the Kilter Texan. Graham, how you doing?
Yep, fine. Gotten over the weekend just. I'm putting together sentences again. I'm using words. So I'm over the angst and anger of losing the game, but here we are. Let's talk about it.
So it was a start, and then not been for a few weeks. I've not recorded for a few weeks either, right enough. But Paul, how you doing?
Yeah, not bad, thank you. Pretty similar to Graham, really. Until I go on social media again and see more clips of roughing the passers and stuff like this, and then just get angry again. So.
Right, well, we'll get that out of the way at the start, I suppose. Say what you want now about the refs, because as frustrating as it was a reason, but it was certainly not the reason. It probably wasn't the top three reasons, which we'll go through. But is there anything you want to, Paul? You want to just get out there now, and then we'll move on.
I just think they're a bit soft, aren't they? Really, you've got these guys. I mean, I don't know what Will Anderson's weighing now, 270, 280, something like that, and he's making little to no contact whatsoever. No matter what angle you look at it, it doesn't look like there's much contact. And then, yeah, he gets thrown 15 yards on a third down, so that gets them moving again. And they were really faltering at that point. Our defence was playing absolutely brilliant, and yeah, it's just a bit of a kick in the teeth. Like you said, it's definitely not the main reason or the only reason, but momentum's such a big thing, and when you get kicked a little bit like that, it's hard to wrestle back sometimes, isn't it?
No, exactly. Graham, any thoughts before we flush it?
Just echo that. It's the penalties were obviously not the complete downfall for what happened in the game, but like Paul said, it's the time and these things, and Kansas City Chiefs fans will tell you that where the first initial penalty happened on the field, it's kind of deep in Kansas territory, but that doesn't matter because we were away to force them on probably a punt. The punt might have ended up giving us good field position of where it was going to be taken from. So it's all about momentum swings, and our defense was probably thinking they're going to get another early stop, get off the field, get a bit of rest, and it's kind of frustrating. I seen Rich Eisen said, I think today or yesterday on his pod, talking about when it comes to these kind of penalties, they happen so fast that when they're actually discussing what the penalty is going to be for, they should be looking at it in the booth. Really looking at these 15-yard penalties on video replay. They can do it, like that. They can look at it really quick. It comes under, what is it, forcible contact? There was no real forcible contact with Will Anderson's one. And then the second penalty on Tua, just as soft, really. At that point, he's a runner. He's just about went out of bounds, and then he's come back inside. He realizes he's run into traffic, and he drops it like the last second. And they are just a bit soft, and they kind of hit us at the wrong times in drives, which I think they might have scored 3 points off that first penalty. And I can't remember if they ended up getting a touchdown off the second one on that drive. So it just shows you if you can get that momentum shifts, things can be different. But not all the woes for the Texans at the weekend, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of general managers and a lot of owners fucking about with the rules every year, and the competition committee or whatever they call it. And I think that just leads to uncertainty. I mean, all the bullshit with the kickoff and everything right this year. I just if it's not broke, why are you trying to fix it? But I think there's something clearly broken there about the fact you can't review it, or you can't challenge it necessarily, depending on when it is and how, and they've got this fucking replay assist, but they just only use that very selectively. There's no kind of rhyme or reason when it is used. And it just kind of puts a bit of a stain on the integrity of the competition a little bit. And look, as I said, it wasn't the reason why we lost. I'm not saying it is for a second. There was many reasons. But at this level, with the money involved, and money's perhaps a big factor, that
Allegedly.
well, yeah, money's a big factor. But I think that with the resources and everything you've got, fair enough. The first one, right? His helmet does touch him, so you could say, well, by law it is because his helmet hit him. Second one, I think that's where when the ref's got to step in and say, actually, it was two of their own players collided. He was just underneath. And he gave himself up late as a runner. So they've got to have a clear guidance, I think, this off season for this not to be, because this might happen again before this tournament's done, and it could sort of impact it further. But I think what has to happen is they have to say they have to be clear on about when and what's a late slide, the technique of that. And if they're going to call 15-yarders, which is effectively the biggest penalty apart from sort of, the pass interference spot fouls that you can get, then there needs to be a really clear guidance on how and what we can or cannot be challenged. Because I think you leave yourself open to making a bit of a mockery of what should be an elite sport.
Yeah.
But sometimes the refs do it. Now, two things. I've got two theories around this topic we'll talk about, because it's back at the end of the season, we're out, right? So there's no next week. I think the league likes it, and I actually wrote an article about this years ago now, and it was published on a website called The Full 10 Yards, I believe, and I did remember sending that out to a number of people. And I've said for a long time that I think they like it because it creates clicks, it creates intrigue. Paul, do you believe that? There's a sort of designed chaos or anarchy element that's actually quite monetary applicable.
Yeah, I mean, it's an entertainment business, isn't it? That's what it's registered as, whether that's for tax reasons or whatever in the States, I don't know, but it is registered as an entertainment industry, not a sports one. But I'm a bit like you. I can understand the Will Anderson one to a degree, and the referee throwing the flag, because when you see the angle behind Mahomes, which is where the referee is, where the flag's been thrown, you could say, yeah, okay, it looks like there's something. But like you say, there's a huge amount of time between the flag being thrown and them announcing it, where it only takes a look on a screen to go, there's not enough there. Mahomes throwing himself around, throwing his hands in the air, gesturing to referees, throwing himself out of bounds. It just, yeah, it leaves a bit of a sour taste, really, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And if the Toa, if the one from Toa Toa was like the Aziz one earlier in the season on the Jags quarterback, yeah, then you could go maybe, well, yeah, fair enough. But he's actually risked taking his own player out of the game, hasn't he? Because there's so little contact on Mahomes, it's ridiculous. But yeah, I think you're right. The league is driven by clicks and intrigue and driving up that intrigue, and I don't think we'll be the only ones to ever discuss this and discuss that topic. And all publicity is good publicity, right?
Well, I think that it wouldn't have been nearly as bad as if the games circling the weekend and the weekend before hadn't had their own like quarterback hits in the way that we've seen them. Like Sam Darnold's head almost got taken off in the end zone by like a face mask, no call. Goff's one, yeah, he's classed as a defender and that, but that could be seen as targeting the way he got hit in the face mask. And then there was a couple late hits out of bounds, or the tackle was maybe engaged just before the quarterback went out of bounds, but it was the manner in which they were thrown down to the ground after that often pulls the flag, and none of them were called. So when you see that happening and you seem to have a refereeing team that just lets the guys play, and then you end up with a refereeing squad that is very protective of one more than the other, because there was maybe a slight claim that Stroud had one missed on him when a sack come in. So you just want it to be fair across the league. You just want them all they either all let them play or they're all really stringent on it. That's just all you want.
Yeah, consistency. I think that's right.
Yeah.
And the thing is, with the Will Anderson one earlier, it was a great chance to just go and take him down. You know what I mean? And actually, like, knock the wind out of him rather than actually just sort of, because his hands do come first. So therefore, that by rule, it could potentially not be. But then there is some form of helmet touching at best. But I think the most egregious ones for me is like the Justin Reed one, where he's blocked the field goal, and I mean, I've seen less called for offsides.
Yeah.
But the absolute most egregious one actually was the third down where they scored the touchdown, the first touchdown, and it's clear holding on Daniel Hunter from the right tackle on the scramble, and that's missed and stuff like that, because that was on the side of the play, that was on the side of the ball carrier. Fair enough if they're coming from the backside and it's missed because there's a ruck of bodies, but that one was the closest to the ball, and they missed that. So it is what it is. And in the first play the first reception of the game to Dalton Schultz hip drop tackle, we already had Mixon miss time for it. That seemed clear because that's a 15-yard penalty, because that's potentially the difference between them scoring 3 and not on the first drive and us scoring an extra 4 rather than kicking a 3. But final theory, it's a bullshit relationship between Kelsey and Swift. Discuss. Paul, fake or non-fake?
Oh, I've got a little girl and a wife who are very invested in it all, so I don't know
Exactly,
if I'm
and there
honest.
is the
And
point,
that's
and that is
That's
the
fair.
exact point. There is the exact point. They've opened it up to a whole new audience. There is shiny,
yeah,
sequenced Travis Kelce jerseys that you fucking weren't buying 2 years ago, but now all of a sudden you've combined $2 billion businesses have come together, and no lies are off the
yeah. I mean,
table. I don't know.
I,
There's something uneasy about it for me. I think it just all seems a bit
I've got
fairy tale forced.
I've not got as much Texans merch as Graham there, but I've got bits and pieces dotted around the house, and I could probably imagine asking the wife to name an NFL team, and she'd name the Chiefs before the Texans. So, and that is the sole reason, the relationship between them two. So, yeah, it's brought a whole new audience and a whole new load of money in
But
terms of
Another
merch sales, hasn't it? So,
didn't the
Graham,
game draw the
another
biggest crowd?
strand. It was the most watched game of the season, 37.5 million viewers.
And that'll tie into your theory.
100%. It is just another strand, I think, to the entertainment industry. And if you didn't need any confirmation that since gambling became illegal, that forced safety at the end to kill the point spread, if you didn't already think it was a fix, you do now. So, hey ho. Right. The real reasons why we lost the game then, because I suppose the biggest one, I'm sure everybody saw it, was tweeted out by ESPN's Benjamin Solak. The Texans were the first team to get outgained by 100 yards, not turn the ball over and lose a postseason game. Previously, in such circumstances, the record for the team that outgained them and didn't turn it over was 49-0. I would suggest a missed opportunity. Paul, how close did you think they got, or was there any point where you thought this is happening here? And how much did they let you think that they might just do
it? I wasn't as close as 4 or 5 years ago when we went to KC in the playoffs and were really dominated at half time. I wasn't quite at that stage where I thought it was on. But, I think it was probably one of our best performances of the season, really, that first half in particular. I thought it looked a little bit more coherent the last couple of weeks, a little more structured. I mean, the defence was incredible, and then the offense were pretty efficient in reality. And I think that's really all you need against them. If you can put together a long period, they are beatable. They're not this invincibles team that everyone seems to think they are. But yeah, I didn't think it was as close. And when you start missing out on special teams like we were, yeah, you're never going to convert it, really, are you? In reality? So
Now, Graham, was there a moment of the game where you thought, think we might, if we just convert here, we might do it.
You know, something, it was after we put together that really long drive, I was like,
Yeah.
you know, something, this is everything that we need to do to win this game, is to be relatively solid on defense, but then put together a long, consistent drive to just keep their offense parked on the bench. And then, but we have to punch it in at the end. You know, you have to punch it in at the end. You can't settle for threes, even though we were doing our best not to settle for even three in the game. But yeah, I actually had a bit of, when I seen that drive happening, I was like, you know, something, we've maybe adjusted here. We've maybe made the right adjustments in this game for a change. But then missing everything that we were missing on special teams felt like a bit of a letdown for special teams to fail us in the most important game of the season after being a pretty solid unit all year. So yeah, that's when I was.
Yeah, the bit, it was, what was the score in the game? It was right at the sort of start of the fourth quarter. They just scored, and we got down there, and we turned. It was the play, it was the drive that we turned it over on down. So we went for it fourth down, which I understand why, because I was, well, I don't understand the decision. I don't agree with the decision. I understand trying to capture that momentum, but it was the drive where we just had a 24-yard pass to Nico Collins, and then that put us down to the 40. And then we went incomplete, and then at the KC 40 we went from fourth down, and I thought, what the fucking hell are you doing, D'Amico? Because then that gave them great field position. But then, to the defense's credit, they forced a 3 and out, and that was the bit that kind of really. There was those 3 drives back to back when you had to have it. After that drive at the start of the third quarter was the best drive they put together all season. It was fantastic. It was blend, the pass and run. There was different receivers, and Nico made a great catch on the sideline to keep it alive, and then Mixon runs it in at the end. And I think Hutchison started the drive. Mechie got a catch over the middle at one point on that drive from memory. So it just looked like things were clicking, and it was always going to be the point things we were going to have to click if you were going to get someone out of this game. And it just kind of crumbled at the worst moment. And I think you saw all parts of it crumble, from decision making on coaching of the pass protection, the scheming of the pass protection. I don't know if you heard that Nate Tice, who used to do The Athletic, now does a different podcast, and a shout out to John Crumpler, who shared it today, and a number of people commented on it, predominant NFL figures, and just said that ultimately that's been the talk across the league all year, that the pass protection just simply isn't good enough. It's poorly coached, it's poorly executed, so you're losing all round. And I think when you try and slide protect, you're basically trying to shift bodies, create traffic quickly, and the ball's going to come pretty quickly. When the quarterback holds on for 3 or 4 seconds and gets a sack, and your tight end gets beat for the third time that day by a player who was a high pick in Karlaftis. Yes, was he a good player? I quite liked him when he came in. It reminded me of Watt a little bit, but he's not the same athlete as that, and you made him look really, really good. And then I think that when I kind of thought it was over, or when it was over, was taking that sack and then missing the field goal. And that left you with 2 minutes to go. And at that point, you kind of thought if you'd have scored there, you would have had a chance to get the ball back. But yeah, I think the turning it over on downs there was just the bit for me that killed it. And then going 3 and out in between that, forcing that 3 and out, and then get another field goal. You got a 4-yard run and 2 incomplete passes. McDuffie broke one up, and then Justin Reed. Sorry, he got injured, and it was Justin Watson that got, or Jalen Watson rather, that blocked it. I think there was just a number of stuff that it just, when the moment was its biggest, when the lights was brightest, literally, because it got fucking very dark versus the start of the game, and it looked cold and it looked windy, At times, I think the offense must be better than what it was in big moments. Paul, is it simple as if you prove the pass protection, this offense will take a leap next season? Is it that simple?
Yeah, I think so. I can't believe that it took their defensive coordinator as long as it did just to start bringing an extra man. It seems like that's what we've struggled with all year, having someone come in a little bit later and shooting a gap has been something that the whole line has struggled with really. And after some early pressure, I'm surprised, or I don't know, I was surprised they didn't look to bring Scruggs in because I think Scruggs the week before had done a reasonably good job at guard. I don't think he was, I think he played better than Mason has for a while. So to see Mason back in there was a bit of a shock. But yeah, I definitely think if you improve, if you keep CJ on his feet and let him let him work, that he's he can do everything, can't he? So. And he's proved that with 40 odd yards on the ground again this week. So
I know, and that was great, and it started to give cause we rushed over for 100 yards, and actually the run blocking overall was great, right? But the sack where Shaq Mason gets, well, the fact that he got put in, I think, is inexcusable, and I think the whole approach by the coaching staff and everybody around that whole issue of the offensive line, and when it looked like you'd kind of improved things, or it looked a bit better, and then to fucking dick about with it again for just to make a change for the change. Say just because you paid, because I'll come back to that. But the play on Shaq Mason,
come back to money.
Where the play on Shaq Mason, right, where he gets beat over Menahu and CJ gets stripped just before they kick the final field goal. It was a drive prior to that in the first half. The only reason why he gets the ball and recovers it is because he's so far behind the play by the time Menahu's got to the quarterback, he's gone. I think, you get players to a certain age, where it just looks like, he might be injured and it might just be a culmination of lots of injuries and he has the off season to get healthy. And he might be serviceable next year because you're going to have to make some tough decisions. We'll come back to sort of contracts and stuff before we finish up. But I think the putting him in just when you look like you've found, it's about continuity, it's about communication at that front. We've talked about it all fucking season. And it just let you down in the worst way, as did Dalton Schultz. But I don't really blame him because he's been asked to block a defensive end where, there wasn't five rushers plus the tight end to block. So, you could have doubled him on that backside if you wanted. But yeah, just the pass protection when you get and I think it's good in some ways that the season's finished with 8 sacks. Not that it's good because if you even maybe take 4 of those away, that might be the difference between putting up enough points and not. But Graham, I suppose the way in which the season's finished in that, I hope whatever you do, you have to address the offensive line this off season. But how do you do it when we've sunk shitty contracts into guys that never deserved it, haven't played up to it, and are high draft picks? How do you navigate that? Because this is a huge amount of resources poured into something that is the worst part of the team by some distance. It's dysfunctional on 50% of their job. How do you fix that, or is it as simple as fixing one off season?
Well, obviously you were right in saying that with having the 8 sacks right at the end of the season, that just makes it more glaringly obvious that needs addressed. That leaves the memory really fresh that there's something really wrong with what's going on. And I agree, Scruggs probably should have started that game just because you'd gotten the continuity from the week before. You'd done really well and bring that into such an important game. I don't think Shaq had played since the game in Kansas the last time. I think that's when he got injured, was it? Yeah, I think that's when he got injured. So, but if you look at it that way, for one off season, you're probably going to have to look at who you can trade out and what you can get. I don't know if you agree with me on that, Paul. You'd probably have to look at trading out some of your big names. And
yeah, I mean, for me, I haven't seen a massive drop off moving Titus to left guard. I haven't seen that as a massive drop off, bringing in Fisher as the right tackle. Haven't, in terms of his performance. Yeah, he got beat by Jones on that one play, but there's guys that have got huge contracts and will go into the Hall of Fame probably that have been beaten by Jones, isn't there? So you can't really knock him for that. I think Titus has probably looked better as a left guard the last few weeks than he has as a tackle for a while. But yeah, you have to do something, and there's 3 fairly big contracts on that offensive line, and the money that we're paying isn't been rewarded in performance. Whether that's coaching, whether we bring a new offensive line coach in and who changes everything and revitalizes it, I don't know, but you need to do something, I think.
Titus was getting interviewed. I don't know if it was back in the Texans locker room or it was surrounded about the Texans facility, and he said that in this offseason he's going to come back the best version of himself, and he'll be the best version of whatever position he's played on the line. It's like, well, really, dude, we are looking for that from the get-go. We're not looking, when we pay you, we're looking for that right off the bat, the best version of you. That's what we're paying for, is the best version of you, not for you to. And I know you can be arsed about moving about on the line and stuff, but you should be playing at a really high level, and we are getting the very best version wherever you're playing right off the bat. You don't need an off season to be that person. I've seen a lot.
You think that signing bonus might have sort of got that motivation up?
Yeah, that's your motivation. So
his body weight and his body type. His body weight and body type, I think, Graham, he looks like a guard at times when he's getting interviewed. But yeah, he's almost, because he's never played that well at tackle, and he got beat off some guy called Wharton at the game. The fuck's that? I don't know. So I just think it's a mess when you think of Scruggs started at centre, then played left guard, then played right guard, then you benched him. Shaq Mason's been the only consistent player at one position apart from Tunsil, and he's been arguably your worst player. And then you've got Tunsil, who at times is good, but I don't think gives you enough in the run game to warrant his contract. You've got Fisher, who's coming towards the end of the season at right tackle, who's shown a propensity to play both. He's played both left and right in college. He practiced all fucking off season at left tackle with Titus at right because Tunsil was getting his knee scoped. You've then got the centre quarterback exchange, which did go awry in the Chargers game. So that's 2 different players that have taken snaps, I believe, at the centre spot. You've then played 2 different guys at left tackle. It's at left guard, and you've played 2 different guys at right guard when you didn't actually have any injuries. You just had you changed it because you felt like that was the right thing to do. So you make all these changes, make all these investments in the draft. Scruggs you traded out for. And your best evaluation is actually Jared Patterson, believe it or not, who was, as I said to you last week, Graham, when you look at Caserio's comments, I wasn't exactly enthralled to pick him up at that point. He just thought, we'll give an offensive lineman, Notre Dame, big school, pumps them out, we'll give it a go. So I think there's failing in the coaching, there's failing in the front office. I question whether they're able to even evaluate this position, because this should have been probably the best unit on the team when you think all said and done. And it was what stopped you being good all season. It's what stopped you winning at least 3 or 4 comfortable games that you lost that you shouldn't have. And when you add it all up together, I don't think you can fix it all in one off season without neglecting other parts of the team and letting your roster be unbalanced. So I still foresee it as being a weakness, all things going well. But I think, I'll go for it now. My biggest concern, and anybody can look at anything I've said in the last few years, and my big criticism of Nick Caserio's veteran contracts. Name me one that he's got right. No. That's been a great deal. Even if you look at Donnell Hunter, huge guarantees. So I think when you look at all these contracts, has he done some great drafting apart from Kenyon Green? Because that's the biggest one, by the way, that knocks that whole thing off, and you forget about that, right? So that was a premium pick that you got when you traded away, name redacted, you had to hit with. You didn't really have much room for error. You didn't. You've kind of got away with it by finding other pockets of value. But I don't. Fucking the Brandon Cooks one was one of the worst as well. Let's not forget about that. We've got, what was it, $16-18 million of dead money if we don't re-sign Brandon Cook. We don't sign Stefan Diggs by the 17th of February. So, the void years and all this kind of stuff, I think when it comes to it, I hope, we're all learning, we all make mistakes, but I hope there's somebody maybe that can come in. Like we used to have Chris Olsen as the cap guy, and all our contracts were pretty sound. And that was probably one of the phases of the best ever teams and rosters, because I think in some parts this is the closest we've ever got to that 2011, 2012 vintage. That was the best team that's ever been in Houston as the Texans. But Nick Casario's contracts, Paul, I think the offensive lines is a part of it. But then if you look right across the roster as well, I struggle to think of a contract that has gone well. Now, you could say Joe Mixon, you could, but then when you look what you've paid him APY versus his play this year looks good. But if you think of the situation at the time where a team that was in theory a Super Bowl contender were happy to get rid of him for a seventh, I'd suggest you maybe overpaid considering the context in the market at that time as well. So I question it, because I always remember in the lean years, he pissed money away on players you didn't need. You didn't need to pay whatever that guy, the center was that went to Seattle and was clearly never going to play again, but you offer him $4 or $5 million a year. You only need to spend the minimum if you're not going to win, and roll the rest. You can roll as much as you want, as long as you hit that 52, 53 rule minimum spend. And he didn't do that in those years, so we should have had more money. And we're only and next season, Paul, I think right now, and obviously the cap is an accounting function. So if you're willing to spend cash, which the McNairs are, you can get round it to a degree. But we've only got 9 million cap space for next season as we sit right now. So I think you'd probably struggle to convince me otherwise that when it comes to that, I think we've got a bit of a shortcoming in the front office as well as we do in some of the coaching.
Yeah, I mean, not for the first time this season, I tweeted at the weekend during the game that Dalton Schultz is probably the biggest mistake that's been made. The contract that he got, yes, he made some good plays at the weekend, but some of the basic stuff that you want your tight end to do, chipping people or chipping rushers and stuff like this, he just doesn't do. We spoke loads at the start of the season about the punter. I don't know what the difference in contracts between what he's got and what Johnson wanted was, but you had a known commodity in Johnson who was very, very good.
Yeah,
very good. And we got Tommy Townsend instead, and you're like, what are you doing?
And another one was they paid and actually retweeted this because it was, and I'll credit this to Lance Zerline. They paid more for Al Shazier than they did Blake Cashman. Wouldn't necessarily say that's it might be an upgrade in intangibles in organization snap at times, but when you factor in the suspension, when you factor in punching people off the side of the field that never get flagged, when you look how well Cashman's played in Minnesota, I'd say that's another one as well. So I think it's starting to tally up, and I think you can't ignore just because you win 10 games 2 seasons in a row, that quickly runs out if you piss money up the wall.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that's down to poor evaluation of the talent that we already have and what their value is from the front office also, though? Like you have Kaufman there, and he played well for us the season prior, so bring him back. But are we going, no, you're far too expensive for what? But I like the look of that shiny new thing in the window. It costs a little bit more, but I'm going to try it, even though I've got a known commodity in the player that I already have.
Oh, and look, I think you've probably got agents on the phone, telling you as many lies as you're willing to listen. You've got to, in free agency, you've got to make decisions really quickly. It's a expedited process over a number of days leading up, and then obviously a flurry of yes, no's, maybes, put your price up, put your price down, conversations, purposely for clicks, but to drive up a bit of value as well for players, I believe, and so. It's one of those things. I just think when you look across this roster, if you continue to draft like you did this year, Paul, with, two great pickups in the secondary, if you continue to play like that and you pick 2 to 3 guys up that are immediate starters for you every year, you'll get away with it. But that just puts a lot more pressure on your draft evaluations when you start overpaying for underperforming vets, and it takes you 2 to 3 seasons to get them off the books because nobody will take them off you. You have to take a cap hit, and then the worst bit of all, it'll stunt the development of players who could be taking those snaps, who you could be getting for a lesser cost, and they're not developing. Because as great as a season Derek Stingley's had this year, Paul, we're going to have to start paying him, and then there's going to be a number of others that are going to have to start paying. So you've got to keep the conveyor belt churning, but the conveyor belt slows fucking down if you put heavy contracts on it. So it just puts a bit of pressure on this team building because we want to stay here, right? But if you make a number of bad decisions over a period of time, it will come back to bite you, and it'll be too much to overcome at some point, because this was a kind of all-in season in many ways where you go and spend a lot of money and you go and put a lot of resources into separate parts of the team. And when that doesn't pay off, there's a payback at some point. Paul, do you think I've been too overly critical in defeat, or is that a fair reflection?
No, I think it's probably fair, isn't it? To a degree. I mean, there's a lot of contracts in certain areas of the team that probably, that are underperforming, isn't it? The line especially, and you're looking at some of the young talent we've got dotted around, and you've got to pay them at some point. With 2 years into CJ, so we've got another 2 years really before we have to start thinking about what he's going to be earning going ahead. Sting making the All-Pro team adds numbers to his next contract for sure. And he's been playing at the level that a lot of us, when you saw the tape of him coming out of college, a lot of people thought he could play at, and he's really demonstrated it this year. So it's all lining up, and you want to keep these players because these are going to be like cornerstones of the franchise for years to come, aren't they? Really. So, but yeah, the problem is, what do you get back for some of these guys that you've got on the team? Could you trade away the likes of Tunsil? Could you trade away the likes of Howard, Schultz, and not have and get something back for them? Or are you going to have to swallow some of their contracts to be able to trade them, which is always a horrible thing to do, isn't it, when you get rid of a guy and then have to pay him still?
Yeah, so there's going to be a lot of swallowing going on, I think, to try and get through all this mire. There's look, it has been, I think it was hard. It's easy to kind of get caught up in that. I think it's glaring when you see the issues. I think there's a lot of pieces that you can add, and not necessarily that expensive to make this offense better. But I think it also starts with coaching as well. I think Chris Strauss is rumored not to be back next year. They're talking about the assistant being, the name escapes me, but as being the potential fill-in. I think the offensive line, I think coach is one of the top 3 non-coordinator positions on your team. Is something they're going to have to invest in. I think with an experienced head as well. When I saw some people put out things about like Chip Kelly and the coaching there in Philadelphia, the defensive line, some of the best in the league, I'd agree with that absolutely. But also that's good talent evaluation as well. So I suppose when you get that close, you are close, but then there's also a lot to filter itself out every offseason. A lot can change very quickly. What has to change for this offense to not falter like we were just talking about there in the fourth quarter?
Well, is it Strouser, the offensive line coach? He's probably on his way out, as you said. But I've been reading that he thought about retiring last season. Now, does that have a knock-on effect? If he's got his head half into retiring, is he really coaching as high a level as he should have been? When you're half thinking about, should I even be here some days? I would prefer if we didn't upgrade that position, that coach from within. I'd rather we went out and found somebody that's, bringing from one of the other teams. Like I hate looking around the league and watching other games and seeing really aggressive offensive lines. And when I look at the talent on some of that lines, I'm like, I don't really see them any more talented than ours. And that's not just in name power alone. And I'm like, how are they doing what they are doing with the talent they've got? So are they just better at coaching all around? So I'd like a coaching upgrade definitely on the offensive line. Is it that time that we'll have the discussion about would it be better for us if Slowick moved on now? Gets a head coaching job somewhere? Is his play calling, is it a bit conservative at times, a bit predictable? But is he calling those plays because he knows that he's not going to get the best out of his O-line play? There's a lot of moving factors in all this, and you can't really pin it down to one single person on that for me. So I really think there's got to be a lot to change. I would like to see us probably see what kind of trade value we can get for Tunzel. I think he's still got some value in him. Get some picks out of him or something like that, and maybe use those picks to build a drafted offensive line, get some good talent in the O line on the draft. But yeah, it's a lot. So there's a lot to change. When you have successful-ish kind of teams like we've had, the bones sometimes get picked, and sometimes the talent that you don't want to leave gets dangled a bigger carrot in front of it, and they end up going. I think is it Nate Ollie? He's interviewing with his defensive line coach. Is it assistant defensive line coach?
Yeah,
he's interviewing with the Falcons. And we can say that our D line's actually been quite a strong unit. And anyone on that coaching side, do you really want to see them going? So it's going to be difficult. There's, like you say, there's a lot of moving parts in an off season, and it's just traversing that and coming out the other side as successful as you were this year, and hopefully in an improved state.
Yeah, I think what they do at offensive coordinator could, because I think when you look at the bulk of the season, nobody will know unless you're in the building, I suppose, Paul Willie, where exactly the offensive line struggles lay. Most people from the outside looking in say it's coaching, because ultimately it's just a lot of, and Titus Howard actually said that at one point. They threw stuff at us that, that we're not coached to do effectively. And Danielle Hunter made a comment about the game plan before. So I think there's definitely frustration there in terms of what has and hasn't happened across the board. But I suppose the what they do at OC, what they do at offensive line, or what they do personnel wise at offensive line, will all be massive. If you were to rank them, I suppose, Paul, being also, let's not forget, you probably need to bring in a wide receiver to make a heavy investment in that, and you probably need to bring in a tight end, at least one, if not two. You might get away with one if you go heavy in a free agent or draft, but then you've got to get out from that Schultz contract, which has got a fair bit of dead money in it. And you probably need a backup running back that you can willing to trust and give them meaningful carries, not just relief. I don't know how you prioritize that without something being neglected just by law of averages, and you've got still two other sections of the squad to try and add to as well. It seems like a tall task when you think if the offense could be the best it can be to make you championship caliber. There's probably too many things there, but how would you rank them in your head if you were to give us a quick rundown of the level of importance you see them as?
Yeah, I think the line's got to be the most important thing, hasn't it? Whether that's coaching or personnel or both preferably. I don't think Slowick will end up going anywhere this off season. I think I don't know. I think there was enough murmurings throughout the season that things. Well, it was obvious that things weren't as good as they were in year one. But I think I'm pretty sure I read that CJ had said that you don't become winning teams by changing your OC every year and chasing things. So I think he's keen to have him back. The last couple of weeks, it looked like they took that break off a little bit and was a bit more adventurous as well. So It showed it was still there to be able to make these plays and make these and get the offense moving correctly. But for me, the line's the biggest one. I think it needs to be coaching and some personnel, whether you can get people out and get picks to bring more people in on rookie contracts. I think it's probably the way they're gonna have to go, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I think you can't ignore the line. But then at the same time, I don't think how many personnel changes you can make. I think you need to bring in the best coach you can to get the best out of the talent that you've sunk money and picks into, because there's going to be limited maneuverability on that side. You might be able to bring one or two in max, and they may just be fighting for places. But I think you just need to do a better job, which is weird because last year Strasser did well with lesser talent at times, had injuries and Noah Fant at right tackle all year and all this kind of stuff. So it's a weird one. But that's the one that I suppose they have to get to the bottom of. Is they neglected to do it. They sort of shuffled the deck chairs all year, and they're going to have to do it. And I suppose, there's some big investments to be made, whether that's, a big time receiver that gives you on a rookie deal towards the top end of the draft. We'll be picking, 25th. So, you might want to trade out and get into the second at that point again, if you can. Or do you take your chances to see who falls? Both strategies have provided fruitful at different stages. But, yeah, I think there's a lot to go on there. I suppose we've not talked about it, Graham, but I suppose you had the worst day you've had in 2 seasons, if not 3 seasons, in fact 4 or however many years Frank Ross has been here in special teams, because if you think the 2 missed field goals, missed point after, 15-yard penalty at the start, big kick giveaway on the opening kickoff.
Getting flattened by your special teams player.
Yeah, Chris Boyd, I think he'll get cut at some point because he's been giving away daft penalties for a number of weeks. But Graham, I suppose you couldn't have picked a worse time, and I suppose that comes back to coaching, position coaches, player mentality, all this kind of stuff. I think it's reasonable to question it, because when this team's been good, it's been all right on defense, limited on offense. Special teams have been great, but when it all mattered the most, it crumbled, and you take those 7 points. Albeit pre-safety that they take intentionally. This game's a hell of a lot closer without doing anything else on offense. So, small things like that really mattered, and it cost you other times in the season too. But, point afters and stuff getting missed. But I suppose, how do you attribute that? And what do you think that says about the overall culture and coaching when your sort of core unit like that just falls away after being so great for the entirety of the season?
I don't think there'll be anyone more disappointed than Frank Ross in that performance. I think he prides himself in having one of, I would say throughout the season, our special teams was probably one of the best special teams units there Absolutely, had been across the league. So for it to fall off as much as it did, were the guys too hyped? We all seen Boyd's reaction, What annoyed me with Boyd's whole reaction was, yes, you knocked the ball out on that return, but you'd let him return it that far to begin with, and Boyd's usually one of the first guys to get there. So don't be celebrating too much, we never even come up with the ball. I think he took his helmet off because he thought he was so jacked that he punched the ball.
I think he thought that we got it back, yeah.
And he seen everyone and he thought we had it, so he was just jacked up. But you said the last couple of weeks he's been giving away some really big daft penalties, and it's like, just get a hold of your emotions. You've been playing the game long enough that you can put a cap on it. I'm sure you can put a cap on it. And then when you see the replays of what happened, pushing Ross, and that was just because he was hyped up and stuff. When you're in an opposing sideline looking over and you're like, they're already falling to pieces after the first play. It's like mentally you're already putting another team in the better foot there for me. Like I know I'd be looking over going, look, they're already at each other's throats, because you don't know what the way it come across was he was trying to flatten him. But when you find out what was actually spoken about after, it wasn't in that premise. But Yeah, I've seen today that just now they're backing him.
Yeah, no, I think that.
Yeah, backing Boyd.
No, and I think that I think if the defensive line and the linebackers and the corners, to a degree, I know the secondary's all one coach, but if we had that sort of level of coaching and execution with not necessarily the greatest talent, but some of these guys have really stepped up and played well. I suppose. What did you think about? I don't think you can rule out at some point. And look, there's a limit to what you can invest in. You can't just take your pick of the best and of all times because the salary cap's there for cost control under the banner of parity for owners. I think Caserio will be allowed to spend as much as he wants and fiddle contracts as much as he wants and convert stuff into signing bonus as long as CJ and D'Amico are all here. Because why wouldn't you? But I think we've shown at times that we need to find a solution across the middle for pass coverage. Now that might be Christian Harris, but it's a contract year for him next year. So we'll see. And I know he wasn't healthy all year, so there's an injury history there. So you probably can't necessarily commit to him unless he shows he's on a clean bill of health for a period. I think Jalen Peachy's, albeit he makes explosive plays at the line of scrimmage, but I think that kind of lets people forget conveniently, Paul, about his inability to pass coverage at times. And I can think a number of games, New England on the road, the Jets on the road, where he just got caught wanting. I'm sure there's plenty others as well. I'm tempted to say Indianapolis, one of the games springs to mind. And I know we missed him when he got injured, but when you saw that our corners were that good, that the Kansas City game plan was just to go after the middle of the field, we knew it, they knew it, and we just weren't able to cover it. I think there's probably and Jimmy Ward's health is a continuing issue. I think there's certainly something to suggest that is probably the biggest part, whether that's a safety, whether it's a linebacker, whether it's a hybrid player, whatever it might be. I think that area of the defense needs a bit of investment and consideration, because that's probably where we've been caught out the most, is just safeties or linebackers getting caught out. No worse than I'm not even going to try and pronounce his name, tight end that scored that 70-odd yarder right up the middle and gutted you like a fish, because your scheme's susceptible to it to a degree. But you've probably just not got the legs in that position. But I think, if you're going to make this defense top tier elite, I think probably that and maybe another sort of rotational, three-headed monster pass rush is probably where I would be looking at this offseason.
Yeah, I was just on a list up on the screen of the people that are out of contract, and there's definitely some names on there that we, need to be discussed, at least look to try and bring them back if we can, if the contract can be done right. But I mean, we said from the very first week of the season, didn't we, that we needed a safety? When you see what was happening and Eric Murray getting as many snaps as he was, and playing, I thought playing to a reasonable standard, to be versus the talent there. But yeah, we need to do something there for sure, because we can't be as wide open right up the middle as we are on the passing plays. I mean, everyone knows what Kelsey's going to do, and he was stood in the end zone by himself under no real pressure to catch that one. So
yeah, that was the worst. That was the worst bit. That was almost the bit of the backbreaker where you thought, we've made the fairy tale kid tight end who's 35 has looked slow all year. We've made him look really good today, and that was
after he did it a few plays before, and completely just walked behind Aziz and not been picked up, and you were like, it's exactly the same play. It just looked a bit more fancy because we actually got to Mahomes on that one and nearly had him down for a sack, and he just flings it out, doesn't he? So
yeah.
That type of thing can't happen.
I know they were desperate to draft a sort of defensive tackle at the top end, and like guys like Braden Fisk all went, and they've all been pretty good in that sort of run in the draft that we missed out on. But I mean, I think that credit to the coaching staff on the defensive side of the ball, the defensive tackles, even guys like Tommy Togalai, who they found late into the season, were all getting in the backfield making. So I think the way in which that the front of the defense plays, I think if you could just shore that up and not give up all these big plays, because that was an issue all season. Like, you know what I mean? The guys aren't going to get home all the time, so just giving a bit more solidity and coverage. You know, we could round off a great unit. I think it faded a little bit towards the end, but that might have been Will Anderson's best play. I think, or sorry, best game. I was about to say there was a number of plays, but it was the first 3 drives. And the best one was, I think it was Xavi Worthy on the screen pass. He just grabbed out a tackle. He grabbed out a hand or a full stretched arm whilst being engaged with the tackle and dragged the guy down by the shoulder pad. Yeah, and that was one of the times I thought, this guy, you know, because I remember in the rookie year I was kind of underwhelmed, and obviously he gets the nice guy tag, and he's very articulate and all this sort of stuff. But that was one of the plays that I thought, you know, God, and don't get me wrong, you know, they obviously gave away the roughing the passer penalty, but you know, there was a number of times that he knifed into the backfield against a bit of a makeshift line, by the way. Let's not forget, like, you know, they've put Tooney, albeit all pro guard, out to tackle and stuff. So if he didn't get his foot trodden on by one of his own players on Thursday Night Football in that disastrous Halloween game where it caused him to miss a bit of time and he was really playing well at that point. I think, you know, he could have been comfortably in the discussion for defensive player of offensive player of the year after winning the rookie one last year. But I think of all the sort of the big investments we've made, I think that one had no choice but to pay off. But it's probably actually paid off better than I would have probably said. So I think he's a bit of a shining light. He's a bit of a cultural setter. He's a bit of a D'Amico too on the field. But yeah, I think it was one of those games when it was a big playoff game that was great to see Will doing that. And actually, if you think of the dollar value that was out there, albeit I know it was a rookie contract versus Donnell, but Donnell didn't have all that much to impact the game with. Because ultimately, you're going to have to let him go, and you're going to have to pay Will at one point. So Will's going to be the bona fide, clear and objectively far and away the biggest star at the two. Obviously, he's getting towards the end of his career. He's on the up, so you'd hope that to happen anyway. But best game I think he's had, and he's a guy you can definitely build around as he stays healthy. You know, I think he's got hopefully, I hope he's got defensive player of the year numerous seasons in him, because he's certainly showing that he's continuing to grow and get better all the time.
Yeah, I think you're spot on with all that. The fact that he seems to have, and I know you don't have, they all say they buy into the culture of the team that they've gone to, but I really think he has bought into the defensive mind culture of what the Texans have been in the last, decade. When you look back to the defense, it was dubbed the Bulls on Parade, like with your Watts and your Barwins and all that. And he has been having discussions with Watt in the last few weeks, or maybe even the entirety of the season. They've been discussing a lot, and you see the same drive and willingness to get in the back and make plays for the team, because he knows that if he can make a play up front on the defense, then that makes life a little bit easier. It should make life a little bit easier for the guys on the back end. So yeah, he's been a huge asset. And when he's playing well, he's not one of that guys who, he's playing well and he does the bare minimum when he's playing well. He kind of shoulders the burden a bit. So I've been very impressed with him. And that, when you mentioned that tackle, I'm surprised it didn't get talked about more, because of just how under duress he was to make that tackle and get him down.
Yeah, it was the first sort of three drives that the Chiefs had. He made a big impact play on all of them. And he came out, the blocks fly, and kind of, you're not going to play like that every series, but I think it was a great game, I think. And I suppose, Paul, with Derek Stingley's season, although it's going to get expensive to retain those two guys we touched on earlier, I think, Derek, myself and Greg talked about this last week, but I think it's been probably the greatest season as a corner. You add that to the fact that you can play man all the time with Lassiter, I suppose. The corner position looks great. I think you just probably need to add a third and maybe a fourth sort of nickel option, which, actually, Phillips actually came in and played pretty well and had a good PBU on Kelsey earlier in the game, and they might have been better just sticking with that. But they need sort of a midfield enforcer, or maybe you need another corner and kick Lassiter inside, and then have a really elite three, and then But I think we just need one or two more just to fortify that, because Jeff Okuda as your third corner was injured and light, and made you play at times guys that shouldn't have been out there. The Green Bay game, I think it was D'Angelo Ross they went after a couple of times, and we were a wee bit light there. So I think as great as the season they've had, you can't expect to play every single snap. So you're going to need to add to what's an elite unit, but just fortify it. That in the pass rush, I think it's luxury problems, but you just want those one or two extra bodies that can contribute, but just make those the two most important position of defense elite by just adding another couple of quality additions.
Yeah, I guess it all the talk around the nickel position. I guess it revolves a little bit around what they want to do with Jalen Petrie as well, because it's probably not a set in this setup. So do we look to kick him and play more nickel, that sort of position when he come out of college? Everyone was talking about him as his hybrid player. Does he do a lot more of that, and then go after more safeties like Bullock really in the draft and see if we can pick up good talent in the second and third round, really, like we did with Lassiter and Bullock. So yeah, there's a lot around there, but yeah, I think Lassiter's been brilliant, hasn't he? He's been a sign of what you can get, and you can get some really good talent. And it was after since we drafted him, just hearing stories about Sauce Gardner and look at what you could have had. Seeing Stingley doing what he's done this year is actually like, no, this is the player we knew we were getting almost, and it's really come good, and he's had a relatively healthy season as well, which is really nice to see. So
I just can't wait for Nick to overpay on that contract and shovel some more straight in it. I joke, but it's fucking true. Yeah, so I suppose we go into the off season, and of Graham, of the contracts that are there, I suppose. How much do you think Nick will overpay to retain Diggs? I'm in jest, by the way, but I would like to bring him back if we can.
Yeah, I think it would be good if we brought him back. There's a lot of chat about, is it Wilson? Garrett Wilson?
Yeah, Garrett Wilson.
What'd you get? I know, and don't get me wrong, is he a fantastic player? Absolutely. That catch him on Thursday Night Football, fantastic. He would make your squad elite, but then you get 1 or 2 years, then you have to pay him rather than getting somebody that you could draft for 4, and it's going to be a first round pick and some if they'd even give you that. Same with like Chris Olave or whoever. So that's a tough one. I don't think we're in the position to give up any picks anymore. I think those days are kind of gone. We've had our shot at that. 5th, 6th rounds, I can fill your boots. You know what I mean? It's a 50-50 hit. If you get a vet in that's got some level of sort of showing it
contribution
to in the league, yeah, then fair enough. But yeah, I think that's a struggle. But a little bit mistakes with Graham, though, that I just didn't think he was the same athlete, Diggs. He didn't give you the vertical speed that he did. He was kind of sort of over the middle and stuff. And is that worth paying probably $20 million a year? You're going to have to get it, because I think, how much is a difference between hoping Mechie takes a step another year healthy versus that? Probably some, but I don't think paying Diggs or Diggs even staying healthy this year was the difference between this offense being, below average to just maybe an average or above.
Yeah, no, I can see why we'd want to bring him back, but because of the situation in the wide receiver room, you're not going to see Dell next year at all. That leads to another hole there. I would really like to see, out of the two of them, Hutchinson come on a lot more. I think Hutchinson has a lot more offer than maybe Mechie does. And that's just on personal preference. Like there's no science or stat behind that. That's the guy I think who will give us more in the long run there. So it's where do we sacrifice, because we've already talked there that we're going to have to look at O-line. You're going to have to look at a wide receiver some way. Like, do we pay a lot of money to bring someone back like Diggs, or are we going to overpay? Most probably, like you said, on historical value. Most likely. we're looking at some defensive units there. How do we cover them all? It's going to be very difficult. I think the defense is going to take the biggest hit. I don't think we're going to concentrate on it too much in this draft, but that might be wrong because of the way D'Amico is wired. What have we got 6 picks this year, I think, in the draft. So I think we're going to have to probably do some business to overturn some of the talent to get us more picks, and build from there. But yeah, I haven't looked at how big the wide receiver class is this season in the draft. I don't know.
It's always big. I think that's the thing. I think there is no excuse for not having a fortified party roster at tailback and wide receiver because they are
Just
10
with
a
a
penny. There is so many. It's 5 wide at all times in college, high school, junior college. They get so many reps. They're all developed. They're all asked to run a relatively complex route tree, and I just think you just got to keep taking them every year because you never know when you're going to need one. I think unfortunately we're going to need 2, because I think Mechie and Xavier Hudson, I like both of them, but they've shown you can't rely on them. So I think we're going to have to try and upgrade there as well. So add that all to the list. But that being said,
Mechie, I feel sorry for because he was obviously stunted in his progression.
Absolutely,
happened.
yeah. So he might, of the pedigree of the two of them, you'd think he would come back, or he's got the most to gain by being another year healthy. I think Hudson is what he is. He's maybe a good 4th or 5th option, but you keep him on a rookie deal. I don't think you see him any longer than that. But that being said, Paul, when you think about the season as a whole, how will you remember it?
Oh, yeah, good question. It's probably one of them of what could have been, really, isn't it? I think everybody had some really, really high hopes at the start of the season that it was all gonna, we'd have maybe took that next step and got to the conference final, the final game, and then when you're in the final 2 in the conference, it's sometimes a toss of a coin, isn't it? Really, to get through. And playing the Bills again would have been difficult. They look really bloody good at the moment. So, but yeah, a bit of one of them of what could have been really injuries again. We say it every year, but the wrong injuries at the wrong time kind of stunted as well. But every team deals with that, I guess, and you have to find a way.
Yeah, no, and does Jalen Petrie still there? Does Tank Dell still there? Does if Stefan Diggs is still there? If you,
but you have the weeks where Will Anderson's injured. We've already talked about the level. Yeah, you talk about the level that he was playing at the time. Mixing that period where he was out, he started the season 200 or 300-yard games on the trot, wasn't it? And then he's out for a long period because of a hip drop tackle that never got called. And
Nico's out for weeks.
Oh, well, no, exactly. And I saw that today that Tank, Diggs, Nico, and Mixon only played 2 games together this year. So there you go.
And after all the hype.
Well, exactly. And I think if they play 10 games together, then is this team better off record-wise? I think you'd be hard-pressed to say that it wouldn't be. But yeah, I think I'll always remember the season for just the offense being a disappointment, and the fact that actually it was tough to watch at times, and it felt like that the lack of decision making, the lack of willingness to go and challenge the issues that we had, festered to the point where when it mattered the most, it caught you out. And I remember after the Green Bay game, because it was there, that D'Amico says we have to get it fixed. It won't happen again, and it fucking did. And so the only person that falls down ultimately is him, and then to a lesser degree Nick Caserio. So they had an issue, they didn't deal with it. The issue was so chronic that it was the unfurling of your season, and it damaged your second year franchise passer. It damaged the team. and it damaged your record because you couldn't win easy games or even games that you did when you let teams back in because you stalled out in the red zone, which was an issue from the year prior. But then your explosive passing game just wasn't there because you couldn't pass protect and people didn't respect you, and they just kept bringing bodies because you couldn't pick up, and it was just so bad that to not be able to fix that in any way throughout the season, I think for me, that is the bit that they'll have to find an answer for because it was almost amateurish at the point of how bad it was left, or how bad it was explained off in press conferences because it wasn't professional, and I think that's the bit that disappoints me the most because there's good enough players on this team, blue chip players. Do you need some more? Yeah, but there's blue chip players in there to take you closer to the team, and despite all that, you go out on the double Super Bowl champions in their house on the road by not many points. And actually, a couple more wins in the regular season, you probably play that game at home against somebody else. And that's, I suppose, where we need to get to because of the next stage, I think, Graham, if it's the AFC Championship game, which has to be the next step, and that's not the goal, but I think if that's the team, and the schedule is easier next year, in theory, as we stand here right now, but a lot can change. But I think you have to get at least the 2 seed so you're guaranteed a couple of home games to give yourself the best chance because for whatever reason, the D'Amico defense formula doesn't travel as well. The team doesn't travel as well. They don't do well in short weeks. So until you fix all that, being at home certainly has become, I think, is the biggest positive, I suppose, that the home games have become a home advantage again, and they hadn't been for a long time. So I think for me next year, I don't know if you agree, but we have to get at least the top 2 seed because otherwise I think we could be in a very similar position without that.
Yeah, I was genuinely disappointed that we weren't in that conversation this season. I think that's what I'll take away from this year. I can't remember in my time of supporting the club when there was such like a feverish belief that the Texans were going to push on and do great things at the start of the year. It wasn't just in-house that people were talking about. That was nation covered that the Texans really were one of the favourites to do something special this year. And the offense just stalled so much for us. Never at one point did I think we had like a Buccaneers-esque performance in us from the season prior, when we could just take it down the field with 40 seconds left and punch it in. I didn't see that all year, so I was really disappointed in that. And although I wanted us to go all the way this year, I had thought that this was the year we could get over the divisional round hump and get to the championship game. So really disappointed in that. And yeah, we're going to have to find a way to travel better. We certainly haven't done that very well. But we also have to find a way of not shooting ourselves in the foot too much. Like even we're saying we played better at home. Like that 2 home games I was at this year, when you go and pick off Goff 5 times and you still lose the game. You score I don't think we scored a point in the second half in that game. Got up early.
Well, that happened regularly this season, I think.
Yeah. I think through 12 weeks, I think the second half was terrible, wasn't it? Probably until we had our bye week. I think we'd have a reasonable first half, and then we come out in the second half, and we just couldn't pass the ball. We just didn't adjust to any changes that the defenses were making against us, and
and the Titans game as well was exactly like it was woeful as well. Like we scored in the first 14 seconds or something in that game, 15 seconds in the first quarter, and then we did nothing really the rest of the game. And there was a spell, you're right, where we couldn't score in the second half, but then we didn't score in the first half in the game, and then we scored all our points in the second half, and it's like, can we just please spread it and work out how to do it in both halves? It's
consistency.
Everyone else can do it. Yeah, it's consistency.
Yeah. And you might get that in year 3 of a coaching staff, and I hope the coaching staff have learned the most, and we find ways to improve the roster. But I think what has to happen is this team, you could never, if you want to be a Super Bowl team, or a challenger, a contender, you can't have games like you did on Christmas Day, because that, as I said at times, was unprofessional. It wasn't worth anyone's time watching. And
horrible.
I think, and we had microcosms of that on Saturday on special teams, where things just were unfunctional or dysfunctional for a variety of reasons. There's a lot going on. That these guys are human; they make mistakes. There's a lot going off the field. There's a lot of detail. Other guys are getting paid on the opposite side too. So there's a lot of factors. But what you need to do is find ways to not lose games that you should win, because there was multiple of those. The one that will hurt the most will be Saturday. But que sera, I suppose, at the end of it. Paul, any final thoughts before we get out of here?
No, I think it'll be interesting what we do in the off season now. Just looking at we've spoke a lot about the defense in the second half of this, and then you look at the list of people out of contract, and you're like, there's some names in there that you might want to think about retaining, even as rotational pieces to it all. And then on the offense, it's big questions. I just keep in my head keep coming back to, what do you do with Tank Dell in the long term? He's had a pretty rough 2 years, hasn't he? Really, with the leg break last season, then getting shot, and then and then this injury. So, like, what do you do with that one? Because he won't. If he plays next season, I'll be amazed with the injury. It's a real nasty one, isn't it? So.
Yeah,
But it'll be another interesting off season of moves and wheeling and dealing, I think.
Yeah, I think we've got a plan that he doesn't play, and that's just simple as. And if he does come back, it's a bonus. Then you're in a good unit. But otherwise, you can't leave a spot open for a guy that has three separate injuries all at once, on the most important part of her leg. Apart from the foot being able to make contact with the guy, then I think it's going to be a tough ask, especially for a guy with such a light frame, and that actually may be a benefit. But yeah, no, absolutely. Graham, any final thoughts before we get out of here?
No, just interested to see what we start with and when we start doing it. I don't think it'll take them too long to get in the lab and start looking at what they're going to do at coaching positions and stuff. And I think the sooner we address it, the better. Gets everyone's feet under the table for when we start drafting some talent, and they can get round or put their 2 pence in about who we're drafting. So I'd rather we got that sorted as soon as possible. It puts us in the best bed for drafting the best people.
Yeah, and I think as the sun sets on this Texans season, and a desperately disappointing day in Missouri, I think the referee decisions only rub salt into the self-created and self-harmed wounds that we made as a team. But I think at least one day we can hope and say we'll be there for a game when it really matters, and this team might have a chance of being successful and getting to a place we never got to. But hell of a lot to do to get to that point. So many things need to go right. But just want to thank Graham, thank Paul, thank Gareth for joining us this season. We were a little bit inconsistent, just like this team was. But thoroughly enjoyed talking about the Texans and a team that hopefully one day this will all be worth it, and we'll be celebrating something that everybody wants, but only 1 out of 32 can do it. So that is the way it goes. It's tough at the top, but it's a hell of a lot better than where we've been. So I want to just thank you again for listening to Turn Up For What podcast. Share, like, subscribe. I don't know when we'll be back. We'll come back at some point in the off season, maybe just to have a chat if any material happens. But thanks to the guys. Thank you for listening. And one day it'll all be worth it, and we'll get there. I promise you that. Maybe. Thanks again, and please, here's to looking forward to next season for Houston Texans.